welcome to episode 107 of the Craft House Magic podcast. My name's Ellie and I'm coming to you from Norwich in Norfolk, and today's the 13th of March. So welcome everybody. I hope you've all had a lovely crafty week since the last time I've spoken to you, and I'm here to share all the things that I've been making in the last 7 days. So today we have some knitting, we have some crochet, we have some quilting, and we have some dressmaking. So I've been really busy doing bits and bobs this week. I've got plenty to show you. Bit of a difference from last week's 8 minutes one. It was really busy last week, so I just had a short one, I'm afraid, but hopefully this week I'll make up for it. I then have my gadget for this month, a few questions from the Ask Me Anything thread on Ravelry, and then I have a few confessions. At the very end of the podcast I'll just do the information on my shop update, which is this evening, the 13th of March at 7 PM. And I have a few new bag designs to show you, so I'm excited to show you those. We have a few make-alongs going on at the Ravelry group at the moment. We have the Retro Mal, which ends at the end of March, but so you've still got time to enter. It's basically anything that, any craft at all, and anything retro related, so it can be any tenuous link as well. I love to see tenuous links. I have been collaborating with Becky from the Back to Blighty podcast to do the What a Lot of Potter Cal. So basically we're doing the Harry Potter projects out of this book, Knitting Magic, Harry Potter, what's it called again, I've forgotten. Just Harry Potter Knitting Magic, the official Harry Potter knitting pattern book by Tanis Gray. And I'm knitting the scarf out of here, which is called the Wizarding Transportation Scarf. And I just wanted to let you know that actually someone was saying that this is actually in the knitting magazine as well, so you don't actually have to have the book to join in. I shall show you my progress on mine in a little while. We have a couple of winners from the Right Around the Corner Shawl Cal, which ended last month, but I'm really sorry it took me a little while to draw prizes for those. So we've got 2 prizes. And I got you-know-who over there to draw out a random number from between 2 and 90. So we got 2 numbers, and we got 86, which is Cara, who's Cara Cool Kitty. And congratulations, Cara, you've won the first of the 2 prizes. This one is a beautiful handmade project bag by my friend Jo, who's So Can Jo on Instagram. She was going to be opening a Etsy shop selling her lovely project bags, but she didn't in the end. But isn't that lovely? Really lovely drawstring bag, nice deep sort of squared shape, with some lovely big pockets in there as well. Thank you, Jo. So this is for you, Cara. And she also sent me some lovely little progress keepers, which actually could be used as stitch markers as well, because they've got quite a large loop there. And isn't that cute? Basset hound. And there's some other sort of knitty related and a little bee progress keeper there as well. I'm also going to pop in a beautiful stitch marker kit from Viv, who's Betty Arthur Creations, and you can find her on Etsy now. And isn't that lovely? A hand beaded stitch marker, or progress keeper I should say, with a couple of other ones in there as well. So that's your prize, Cara. And the second of the prizes was post number 36, and it was Brit Hockey Mum, which is Anne from Canada, and Anne happens to run the Toby Knits podcast, so congratulations, Anne. I still haven't seen your podcast yet where you show your shawl. I'm going to have to watch that because it's beautiful turquoise colours. And Anne, you have won another one of these lovely stitch marker sets that Viv donated, and she's Betty Arthur Creations on Etsy. And also I'll get you to choose one of the bags from my shop. If you choose a medium-sized bag, you can choose whether you want a zipped or a drawstring closure as well, so do let me know. Both of you, can you send me personal messages with your full postal addresses so I can get that over to you guys. So congratulations. So that's enough of the admin-y stuff. Let's get on to the knitting. So first of all, I've been working on my socks. And these, I can't remember where I got up to last week, but I don't think I'd finished the first sock, and this is how I've got on so far. I've finished one sock and I'm working on the second one. I'll show you in a second. So this is the lovely Cha-Cha Chevron sock pattern by lovely Sandra of Cherry Heart, and this pattern is gorgeous. This is the second pair that I've knitted in this pattern, this beautiful chevron shape, and I started knitting it for the Strictly Sock Along, which was run by Ali from the Little Drops is Wonderful podcast, and I joined in and then I never actually finished it. So I finished a full sock there, and you can see those lovely chevrons. Don't look too closely because I'm sure there's a couple of places where I made some mistakes, but I just carried on. So the colourway I'm using for this one is Don't Worry, Be Happy for the main part of the sock, and then the little mini that I use to go with it is Shiny Happy People, but I do sell this as a sock set on my shop, and it'll be under the Don't Worry, Be Happy colourway. So that's the first one, and the second sock I'm basically quite well into the foot decreases there, so I'm nearly on my way to finishing a whole pair of socks again. So that'll have another pair of socks off the needles. And I still have two, I think, on the go. So I must finish those as well. And then I can cast something on you. At one time I had about 7 pairs. Oh dear. So there we go. That's how I'm getting on with those. Really love this pattern. I'm definitely going to knit another pair of these. They were so much fun. And like I said, the pattern's called the Cha-Cha Chevron Socks by Sandra Paul. So my second work in progress is my scarf that I'm knitting for the Harry Potter cal. So I'll just show you the picture again of the scarf. So it is called the Wizarding Transportation Scarf. And it's got some really lovely colour work. And you can see that there's the night bus, some broomsticks, and then platform 9 3/4 logo there. And it's knitted in like a tube shape on some quite short needles. So I used the 16 to 18 inch cable length with the needle tips are 4-inch needle tips out of my higher set. I do sell these in my shop if you're after something like this, and because it's quite a tight little loop, I've got my little panda needle stoppers there just to stop my knitting coming from off the needles. Isn't that cute? And I've got my favourite turquoise colour. So this is how I'm getting on so far with it. My colour work isn't the neatest in the world, I'm afraid, but you can see that there's like a checkerboard pattern at the bottom, and then you can see the wheels of my night bus. I think I'm going to have to be careful how tight my floats are at the back here, because I think I'm getting a little bit tight just over the bottom of the night bus, so I'm going to have to watch out for that. I probably don't need to tie it in as often as I have here. Well, not tie it in, but knit it into the work as often as I have, because it's going to be sort of flattened and it isn't going to be exposed to anything. But I feel that it's wrong to leave massive loops anyway, even if I'm not going to have it exposed to anything. But there we go, that's how far I've got so far. It took me a while just because I hadn't sorted out the yarn and dyed the yarn myself. So the colours I've used, I'll show you here. So far I've only used 3 of them. I've used some of the grey, and this is Ordinary World. I'll tell you about the base in a minute. This one is purple to do the night bus, and this is called Purple Rain. I then have got a blue, and this is Because the Night. That colour there. And then last but not least, I'm using Walking on Sunshine, and that's going to be for the broomsticks, I think. So I've got 4 colours. In the pattern it says to use one of each, apart from the sort of grey colour, which it says you need 4 skein. So the yarn I'm using is my own hand-dyed yarn, and it is the merino and nylon base, which is Aran weight, and it's 115 grams, and it's 190 meters per 115 grams. And in the book, the yarn that they use is 113 grams and 187 meters, so it's very similar. So I've dyed myself up one each of the the different coloured ones, and then 5 of the grey. So that should be enough to knit the whole scarf. So that'll be lovely and squishy. Very exciting. I think Adam's already got his eye on this. He said, have you started my scarf yet the other day? Oh dear. So I hope to have more of this to show you on the next podcast, but I'm really starting to get into this now. It is a bit awkward knitting on really thick yarn in colour work, because I've never done Aran weight colour work before, so that's exciting. Now I've got over the wheel bits, I feel as if I'm really getting into it now, so that should fly off the needles hopefully, literally. That was supposed to be my reference to Harry Potter, but that really wasn't funny at all. I think I've had too much tea this morning. Oh dear. So that's my second of my knitting works in progress, and that is all the knitting that I've got to show you today, but I do have some crochet and other things. So I'll go on to my crochet section first. So I haven't touched my corner to corner crochet blanket for a little while, but I just had a feeling that I needed to do some more crochet. So I got my blanket out, and this is how it looks. I'm going to pull, I've got to make sure I don't get this tangled. So this is how I've got on so far. It's getting really quite big now actually, so I think the last time I showed it to you, I'd got to where this stitch marker is here, or progress keeper, so I've done quite a big gap there. So I'm trying to, I've got quite a lot of light blues, so I'm interspersing the light blue with some pops of different colours so that it doesn't sort of look too much like a baby blanket. But I do love the texture of this blanket. It is so nice, and it's quite a thick weight as well, so I'm holding the yarn double. I've got 2 threads here, one where I've got a magic knot ball of all my scraps, and then just a plain undyed merino nylon 4-ply, so it's probably sort of like DK really weight once I've got them both crocheted together. I was thinking that I might knit until it comes to about 1.5 meters to be the sort of width of the blanket, and then I'll make it a longer rectangle shape in the other direction. But it is coming along quite quickly, although it does take me possibly about half an hour to do one row now, because these are getting quite long. But it's a nice sort of mindless crochet project, and I'm also using up my little scraps as well, so that's always a good thing. So a few of you have been asking me there was a pile of squares here, crocheted squares, what am I going to do with them? I finally actually got them out to block them. So I was crocheting the Nature's Walk blanket quite before Christmas. It must have been November, I think, maybe before that, and I did all the squares, and I did 60 instead of 48, I think it said in the pattern. So I got all the squares ready to use, and I thought, well, I need to block them, but I kept putting off blocking them because I need quite a lot of floor space to lay out all those squares. But in the end I did get round to it, and I needed to block them because some of the squares were quite sort of lacy, like this one, so it needed to be pulled out a little bit, just so that I could find it easier to sew them together, or crochet them together I should say. And I'm sort of halfway through crocheting them together now. It's going to be difficult for me to show you this, but I've got the full length all crocheted together in one direction for 4 blocks, and I've got another 2 rows to add on there in length. I don't want to lift it too much because it might weigh it down a bit because it's not been joined in the other direction, but you can see how I've sort of gone along and joined the pairs in so that they're all joined together in that direction. I've got the 2 more rows to add, and then I'll start going in the other direction, so sort of joining these together, if that makes sense. So it's a bit difficult to show you at the moment. what this looks like. So this is the Nature's Walk blanket, and this is another pattern by Sandra from the Cherry Heart podcast, and I picked up a kit from Black Sheep Wools to make this, and the sheep is stonewashed. It's 78% cotton and 22% acrylic, and it's really nice to work with. It's got a nice little halo. This is the colour I'm joining them together with. So like I said, I got the yarn as a kit from Black Sheep Wools, but I think they ran out of a couple of the yarns just before I got mine, so I ended up having a couple of the colours replaced. This pale colour was replaced with a brighter colour, but I managed to get hold of a few skeins from another shop, which I can't tell you off the top of my head which one it was, but there are loads of other shops that sell the stonewashed sheepies. But I managed to get that to replace it because I just thought it was a little bit bright, but I really like how the colours work together. I think a couple of the others were changed as well, but there wasn't so much of a difference, so I wasn't so bothered about those. So we're getting there slowly. Hopefully next week there'll be a bit more of a sort of one piece rather than it being all over the place. So there we go. Ta-da! So that's all my crochet to show you. So my local quilt group and I have been doing stuff to make charity quilts for Linus Charity among others, and we've been putting together some of these blocks that the club sort of had to hand to make some simple quilts that are sort of mixed bright colours all together, just to make a nice cheerful quilt. And I just put the blocks together. They're 5 by 5 squares, so they were quite nice and easy to put together nice and quickly, and then I just quilted them with some diagonal quilt lines. My friend Margaret was saying that she actually likes to use a 4mm stitch length, which I did for this one, and I actually really quite like it. So normally for quilting I'll use a sort of 3mm stitch length, but I think that the 4mm works quite nicely. And just on the back is a bright green there. I did the binding mostly as I usually do, but I thought I wanted to make it extra secure because it was going to charity. I actually used a machine zigzag stitch across the work there, if you can see it very well. So I used a machine zigzag stitch there across the binding just to secure it in place. I don't tend to use a normal straight stitch on the binding because sometimes it's not perfectly in place and it looks slightly messy, so I cheat and use a zigzag. I normally wouldn't use a machine to go around the binding. If it was a quilt that I'd have at home, I'd just hand stitch it, but I thought it might be a bit more secure if it's going to be for children. Plus, it's quicker. That's a good excuse, isn't it? So we'd also put some strips together that we didn't perhaps like the colours of for the local dog charity. So we'd got these little panels there. What we thought, well, they're not particularly interesting for children to have, but we'll pop those together and actually use them for something. And they're going to be for the local dog charity, and they're not very big, these particular ones. They're just a little rectangle with some soft and bright quilt wadding in there, just so that it for the little dogs to lie on, because otherwise the strips will just be hanging around. We might as well make it up and make good use of it. So that's my second sort of charity project. I was then feeling as if I was thinking, I really need to do some more quilting, so I got out my sort of whips box which has got quite a lot of things in, and I found this block that I did absolutely ages ago. Excuse how crease it is, but it's really pretty block that I did. I can't remember who it was that did the class. If I remember, I'll put it on the screen. So we did this in a class a couple of years ago, and then I never got round to actually finishing it. So originally, well, when I'd done the block, I actually put extra corner pieces to make it larger. But then I decided, what am I going to do with that? I wasn't going to make it into a sort of a small quilt. It's not really big enough for anything. And I wouldn't use it as a wall hanging because it's not really the colours that I'd put on my wall. So I actually took those strips off the sides and I'm going to make a bag out of it because I thought that would be handy to take my paperwork down to my local quilt group when we have meetings and things, so watch out for that. So hopefully that'll make me get on with it and finish it. I do really like it actually, and I don't know why I've left it to one side for so long. There's just so many other things to distract me. So that's all my quilting for this time, but I do have a bit of dressmaking. It is unfinished, so bear in mind. But Barbara is going to come and demonstrate to you what I've done so far on this project. Barbara, would you like to come over? Thank you very much, Barbara. So Barbara is showing you my unfinished indigo. So the pattern is by Tilly and the Buttons, and it is a floaty top which comes down to just sort of 3/4 length, with some nice big floaty sleeves, and you're supposed to make it out of something that's not stretchy and a sort of floaty drapey fabric. So I've chosen some viscose rayon that I picked up from Plush Addict. If I can find the link, I'll put it in the show notes as well. I'm sure they might sell it still because it wasn't that long ago when I purchased it. It's very creased as well. Obviously there's a theme going, lots of creased projects today. But this is how the top looks so far. Obviously I've got to add sleeves on there. But it's got some facing around the neck, and I did do the normal understitching on the facing, but I don't like facing sort of just wiggling about. So I like to top stitch it down, even though you can see it from the outside, just because I can't bear things to not lay flat when you're wearing them. If you know, if it keeps moving or anything, or you have to keep adjusting it, that will absolutely do my head in. So I just thought, let's stitch it down, and I quite like the effect of the stitching on the top, so I think that gives it quite a nice effect. And I did that all the way around the back. The bodice panel, when I was cutting the pattern size I wanted out of the bodice, I used a block that I'd created in my pattern cutting course to work out what size to do the sort of bust area, to save me having to sort of do muslins and that of every pattern that I ever make. So I laid that on the top and then sort of basically traced around my block that I designed for myself, so that I know that it'll fit, and then I've cut out the pieces, and then I've gathered the bottom panels in so it'll fit into the bodice. So it's like a gathered sort of skirt, but it is just the top version. There is a dress version of this top as well, to go in there. And then what I need to do next is gather the top of the sleeve and fit the sleeve into place, and then there's a frill that needs to be gathered as well before it's fitted into the top part of the sleeve, and then of course hem it, and then it's done. So with any luck I might have finished this by next week, but at the moment I think it looks really nice. I've not tried it on properly yet, and I'm relatively confident that the bust's going to fit me okay because I used my my template that I created in the pattern cutting course to choose that, so hopefully that'll be okay, and I shall show you how it fits on me next week, hopefully. So thank you ever so much, Barbara. Thanks, Barbara. So we have my gadget next. So I have actually, this is sort of a part of my confessions as well, that I've bought myself a new cutting mat. So I normally get mine from Creative Grids, and I normally get the A1 size with inches on, but I decided that I needed to have one that was more fitting to the colour scheme of my craft room. Also, the old ones I got them, they were quite worn, so I thought I'll treat myself to a new cutting mat. So I got one from Amazon because I found one that was a pale grey, and I think that it looked much better with my craft room, makes it look much bigger. So I'll pop a picture up here so that you can see what it looks like. And I'm really pleased with it. So the Creative Grid ones are supposed to be sort of self-healing, and I think this is pretty much the same thing actually. This one was from Amazon, like I said, and I will leave links in the show notes to both Creative Grids and this one that I got from Amazon, just because it's in a fancy grey colour. I think you can get bright pink ones as well, because I was sick of the dark green, boring. And I do think it's really useful to have a nice cutting mat. Not necessarily looks nice and nice colour or whatever, but it does save the work surface as well, so a very good gadget to have if you're a crafter. Right, so I've got a few questions from the Ask Me Anything thread. So Mary Celeste Knits was asking me, when is the appropriate time to sew in the ends, before or after blocking, and when do you trim the yarn? So I personally think that it's nice to be able to sew in the ends before you block them, so that when you block the material out, the ends sort of embed themselves in the material nicely so that they don't show up very much, and then I trim them afterwards, so that if once you're stretching the material out, blocking the material out, it can work its way so it's in a sort of comfortable position, and then when you trim it, it won't sort of have any ends poking out after you've blocked it. That's what I think anyway. You could always block twice, I suppose, if you're really concerned about it. So block, then sew your ends in, and then block again. But to be honest, everyone does it their own little way, but to get it as neat as possible, I think blocking first is a good idea. So I hope that helps, Marie. I think that's your name anyway. I've just written your Ravelry name down. I've got a message from Raquel, who's Rick Rack on Ravelry. Raquel was asking me if I had to do one craft for a year, what would it be, and if I had a new craft that I wanted to try. So I think I've answered a similar question to this quite recently, in that I think it'd probably be sewing, because that's a bit of a cheat, because there's lots of different types of sewing. I must admit though, I don't think I could live without sewing, although I think I'd have serious problems if I couldn't knit, to be honest, as well. So that's a very hard question, Raquel. But I'd say sewing. But she was also asking me what new craft I'd like to try. This is difficult too. I would actually like to try pottery, like throwing a pot. I've been watching a few episodes of the pottery throwdown, and that looked absolutely brilliant. Really tough and difficult. And obviously I'd never get to that level, but I'd like to have a little bit of a go. And I do like misshapen pottery as well, so it'd be alright if it all went wrong. So the next question is Fran de Fleurs again, and she was asking me whether I knew about any afterthought heel flaps. I don't think that you can possibly get an afterthought heel flap that isn't a heel flap in the traditional sense, and you were saying that you don't like doing the short row heels, but when you're doing an afterthought heel, it's not really short rows. You're going round and doing decreases, so that you end up with a small opening at the end, which your kitchen are together. So it's not as bad. Well, I quite like short rows myself, but it's not the same as short row heels, if that makes sense. Or it might be, you might have been referring to the fact that it doesn't fit as well. I do think that if you make sure that you increase stitches once you've picked up stitches for your afterthought heel, and then I do a couple of extra rounds and things like that, and actually if you watch my afterthought heel tutorial, which I'll leave a link to up there, I do say a few tips that helps for a high instep, because I personally have quite a high instep myself, so hope that's helpful. I have another question from Socks Knits, and she was asking, saying that her colourwork socks were too tight, and then she cast on more stitches and they became too big. My suggestion is that you use a larger needle size just for the colourwork section, and then go back to your normal needle size for all the rest of the sock that you're used to knitting, because personally I find that my colour work gets really tight as well. And as you've noticed, my floats were a bit tight on my current project, so I think going up a needle size just for the colour work section. I think for socks I've gone up a 0.5 millimetre or maybe 1/4 millimetre. I think it's best just to try it out, because it depends on how tightly you knit your colour work really. Some people really loose, so it doesn't matter so much to those. So hopefully that'll help you get on with your socks. And last question but not least was from Norrington51, and she was saying that she finds it difficult to cut out a straight line on fabric even when she's following the selvages. Now it depends on what materials you're using to cut your fabric. So if you're using scissors, it might be worth actually drawing a line out with a heat removable pen, for instance, and then using that line to cut along, so that you know that you just confirmed it's definitely straight before you start cutting the material. That might help. I quite like using a rotary cutter and cutting mat to get a nice straight line. I find that's easier for me. If you're using quite slippery fabrics, that can help as well, because you haven't got to lift the fabric to get the scissors underneath. If you are using the selvage, sometimes you can't always get a straight line because the selvage isn't straight, if that makes sense. If you just snip the edge of the fabric and tear the fabric along where the weft threads are, so the warps along the length of the fabric and the weft is sort of from left to right, that's how I remember it. If you split the fabric and tear it along the weft, that'll be along the straightness of grain. So if it needs to be like dressmaking or something where you need it to be perfectly on grain, that's a good way to do it. But sometimes that can be a bit scary, so it depends on how nervous you are and how expensive your fabric is. But they do it all the time in fabric shops, so it's just trying things out and finding a way that works for you, really. So I hope that helps again. So thank you for all your questions. Don't forget, if you can pop your question in the Ask Me Anything thread in the Ravelry group if you've got something you'd like to ask me, and I'll try and fit it in the podcast. Hopefully this isn't going to be too long, this podcast. We'll see how it goes. I might have to cut bits out. So I have some confessions to show you now. I had a need to buy some stitch markers and progress keepers. So Jiggles and Beans always make some lovely little progress keepers and stitch markers with these gorgeous faces on, so hopefully you can see those. Aren't they adorable? I have quite a few others of these progress keepers and stitch markers from her. I just had to have these. I think the one that drew me first was this little lolly. So she's got one with a bite out of it as well, but it's got some icing and some hundreds and thousands on the top. So I thought, well, if I was just buying one, I need to have some more to accompany it. So I ended up buying 3. And then I saw that lovely Cheryl from Chapel View Crafts had got these lovely sandwich progress keepers, which I had to have. There's like a ham sandwich with cheese in, a peanut butter sandwich and a cheese sandwich, I think. But I just thought they were absolutely adorable. Had to have those. So it's Cheryl Cunliffe and it's Chapel View Crafts. And she's got her website, chapelviewcrafts.co.uk. And I also had to have this gorgeous little treacle tart. Isn't that adorable? Makes me want to eat cake now. So I've got loads of lovely little new progress keepers. So that was a bit naughty. But sometimes you just have to treat yourself, don't you? Oh well. But I did have 2 lovely gifts through the post. So lovely Julie from Suffolk Socks sent me a lovely card and a gift. She sent me this beautiful thank you card because I sort of helped with the Suffolk Socks retreat, and then she sent me this gorgeous picture. So her daughter actually designed and painted this. Isn't that lovely? So that's knitting in a bottle. And it makes me feel like I'm on a beach there. Look at the lovely palm trees. Thank you, Julie. And she also sent me one of these gorgeous glass socks, and that is going right in my window. Isn't that lovely? She sells both of these things on her shop, which is Suffolk Socks, and I'll leave a link in the show notes as well. But I thought that was gorgeous. I thought I need to add a lovely thick ribbon on there, and I can hang that from the window with one of them little sucky pads, and I think that'll be gorgeous. Can't beat a lovely sock shape, can you? So that was from lovely Julie. And then unexpectedly I got a beautiful present from one of the people that won one of the prizes from the previous knit-alongs. No, it wasn't. It was one of the 100th episode, I think it was. Lovely April won that, and she sent me this gorgeous card with a sheep on it. And she's from Canada, so her local yarn shop is a Smash Tricot, so she sent me this most beautiful gauge for working out what your little gauge is, and for the needles as well. I thought that was absolutely lovely. Thank you so much, April. And a pin badge and some beautiful David's tea. But I might have had all the David's tea already. Thank you so much, April. I really enjoyed having those. I wish that I had a David's tea supplier closer to me, because I don't think I can get hold of it. If anybody knows of a place in the UK that supplies David's tea, I will be so grateful. Thank you so much, April. That was so kind of you. And it was such a lovely little surprise in the post. Thank you. I do have one more purchase to show you. So we were originally going to Disneyland Paris next month, but I don't think we're going to be able to go now just due to the coronavirus. But I'm sure we'll be able to go some point soon. But I bought this fabric in the thought that it looks a little bit like Minnie Mouse. It is a jersey fabric, and I thought that I could make what's it called? I can make a Frankie t-shirt from it with black sleeves, because I thought it'd be a little bit like Minnie Mouse, but not too in your face. So this is the fabric I got, and I actually picked it up from eBay because I couldn't find any of my normal supplies that I get it from. Something that was so similar, that they're ovals rather than circles, but I think that's quite cute. And it was sold as a viscose jersey, but it feels like cotton to me. I have actually already washed this, and it seems to wash nicely, so I think I'm gonna have to get myself make myself a Disney top, even though we're not going next month. But isn't that fun? Isn't that gorgeous? Love it. Right, I think that's all my confessions this week. Oh, apart from my cutting board, which I had in my gadget section. Which is, obviously I need that for working all the time, so I've got a good excuse for buying myself a cutting mat that matches my craft room. Oh dear. So it's just the shop update now, so thank you so much for watching if you're not interested in that, and I shall see you next week. But for those of you who do, I'll go and get my stack of bags that I've been making this week. So first of all, I'm re-releasing my bee bags, but I'm doing it with just a plain white lining this time. So this is the zipped one, and then I've got ones that are drawstring as well. But like I said, these are white lining instead of the bee print that I used to sell them with. I couldn't get hold of any more of the bee print, but I thought it was a shame not to be able to make them with the, I stamp a bee on it and then I've stitched around it with free motion embroidery. And then on the back I've done my logo, well, on the back I've done my name, Craft House Magic, and a little beehive there in free motion quilting as well. So just a nice little subtle pattern. So they're both medium size, these ones, and I also have all the accessories to go with them. So again, they're all white inside. So there's a little notions pouch with the bee design and stitched as well, and the back is just plain. There's a little bee progress keeper on the zip. I've got the circular needle cases with the same design on as well. I do have a video that shows you how to use these, and I'll link it up there if you're interested. I have DPN cases with bees on, and scissor cases, and they're all stitched as well, these, with a stamp with a stitch around them. And you can choose to buy scissors or not. And the bags all come with a little lavender sachet, which has also got the stamp of the bee on as well. So I've got some new cat fabric that's to do with knitting. Oh my goodness, I love this. So the first one I'm going to show you is the giant one. So this is my large size bag, and this is in a drawstring version, but I do the zipped one as well. So it's a really big inside. It opens up to a box bottom. That's how big the box bottom is. And you can get a really big jumper size project or a blanket in there. And then I also do a medium size bags, which are this size, which is plenty big enough for sort of a large shawl. It can easily get 400 grams in there, this medium sized one. So this large one, you can get absolutely massive amount. I think when I knitted my antler cardigan, I could get at least 10 skeins in there, and there was room for extra as well. So there we go, that's the two. But I just love this print. Isn't it gorgeous? If I go back to this one, I can show you all the different cats. I love this so much. Absolutely gorgeous. I love every single one of these cats. Some of them are very cute. There's one with little pink cheeks. This one here. And then there's a dark grey one which I think is really cute as well, in a little blue jumper. But they're all wearing knitted jumpers and there's balls of wool all around them, so I love it. And I chose to use the yarn ball lining to go inside because I thought that was nice and bright. But if you don't want that lining, I can do you like plain white or pink or something as an alternative. I do have some zipped ones to choose from as well, and I've got, for the zipped ones you get a little cat progress keeper to go with that. But isn't that cute? Love this print so much. I'll just show you inside that one. So these medium ones are box bottom as well, they open right out. So there we go. I've also got all the accessories. I'll quickly go through those. So we've got the little cat notions pouches, DPN cases, circular needle cases, and scissor cases, and that just buttons down. I leave them open just so that they don't get so creased before I've even sent them. Isn't that cute? All the medium and large size bags come with a little lavender sachet as well in matching print, because I think that's very important to have matching accessories. So I'm going to do some little stitch marker or progress keeper sets with the cats. And I've got the lever back clasps as well as the lobster clasp versions. And then you can also choose the stitch markers, and you can choose the larger or the smaller rings depending on what size needles you tend to use. But I think that the little cats are really cute. But there we go. I've also managed to get some more sheep fabric, so the sheep fabric bags will be available again at this week's shop update. I think that's all for today, so thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you'd like to see more, and I'll see you in the next episode. Bye!